It is a divine miracle that comes down from heaven in which we do not participate. We didn't participate in our election before the foundation of the world, and we do not participate in our regeneration in time. That's a work of God. So now we go back to the story. So let's go back to verse 4. How did Nicodemus respond to the statement of Jesus in verse 3? Unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. Now he's talking in the third person. They're having a theological discussion. It hasn't gotten personal yet. Preachers have said, well, Nicodemus doesn't get it. He doesn't have any idea what Jesus is talking about. He's very confused. So in verse 4, Nicodemus said to him, how can a man be born when he's old? He cannot enter a second time into his mother's womb and be born, can he? Some people think he's being sarcastic. Some people think he thinks this is ridiculous. This is a joke. You can't be born again. That this shows his ignorance, and he's sort of scoffing and laughing at it. That's not correct. That's not at all what we have here. He knows Jesus just read his mind. He doesn't say to Jesus, why'd you bring that up? Why are you talking to me about the kingdom? Why are you talking to me about this? He doesn't ask that. He knows Jesus just read his mind. And he knows Jesus just said, you can't get in the kingdom by anything you do, any more than you could bring about your own birth. This man lives in a world of analogies. The rabbis, that was their world, the world of analogies, illustrations, parables, word pictures, parallels. He's brilliant. He's the teacher in Israel. He's a logician. He's spent his entire life in theological discussion and dialogue. He completely understands what Jesus said. He gets it 100%. And he jumps right into the third person discussion. And he says, how can a man be born when he is old? I'll use your analogy. He cannot enter a second time into his mother's womb and be born, can he? That proves that he totally understood what Jesus was saying. Jesus was saying, you come into the kingdom, but you can't do anything about it. He gets it. He understands the figurative language. The rabbis and teachers used it all the time. So he takes up the analogy and he says, hey, you're telling me it's humanly impossible. Impossible. You're speaking of something that's impossible to me. Now, he doesn't miss this at all. He does not miss it at all. Jesus doesn't tell him how to be born again. He knows better than that. Jesus is telling something that there are no how-tos for. He understood it better than most evangelicals, I'm afraid. If an unsaved Pharisaical hypocrite, part of a false religion, can in one conversation grasp the simple truth of the doctrine of regeneration, why is the church so confused about this? Where have we been? And why do so many preachers tell people the steps they can take to be born again? He was reacting as any legalist would react. Are you kidding me? I've spent my entire life doing things to get into the kingdom. Now you're telling me the only way into the kingdom is by means of something that I have nothing to do with. Here's the heart of the gospel of grace, isn't it? All he'd ever known was you earn it, you achieve it by religion, ceremony, ritual, morality, human goodness. That's why Jesus says, truly, truly, because he's saying, essentially, you've been caught up in the damning lie of Satan that you can earn your salvation, and I'm telling you the truth, the truth. He is hearing for the first time in his entire life, and he's had lots of theological discussions, for the first time in his entire life, that God has to do something in his soul that is a work of creation that comes down from above that he does not at all participate in. He is stunned by this. Absolutely stunned. Jesus could have said to him, yeah, I know it's a big change for you. I know it's, sorry, I'm going to have to kind of reprogram you. But he doesn't. Down in verse 10, Jesus says to him, are you the teacher in Israel and do not understand these things? How did you get to that position if you don't understand these things? He does not let Nicodemus off the hook. It is inexcusable that Nicodemus doesn't understand the new birth. It is inexcusable that he doesn't understand regeneration. It is absolutely inexcusable. Wow. But he's going to help him. So he's going to give him 2 hints. 2 hints. Hint number 1 comes in verse 5. Hint number 2 comes in verse 6. And this is good teaching. This is how teachers work. Effective teachers. They lead the student. They don't give them the answer. They lead the student. So here's the first hint. This is new to you, Nicodemus? And you're the teacher in Israel. This is new? Let me put it another way. Verse 5. Jesus answered, "Truly, truly, I say to you," still in the third person, we're still talking theology here. "Truly, truly, I say to you," does this help? "Unless one is born of water and the Spirit, he cannot enter into the kingdom of God." You know, anytime you're having a conversation and somebody gives you a riddle, what's the first thing you ask for when you can't figure it out? Can you give me a clue? Give me a hint? Nicodemus has hit the wall. He just heard something he's never heard in his life. Can you give me a clue to this? Jesus said, "I'll give you a clue. Unless one is born of water and the Spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God." Does that jog your mind, Nicodemus? Water, Spirit, water, Spirit. Have you heard that? Traditional sermons on this have said, well, water and the Spirit means this. The water is human birth. Because we say prior to the birth of a child, the water breaks. So you have to have a human birth, a physical birth, and then a spiritual birth. So you must be born of water, that is physically born, and then born spiritually. Really? You mean Jesus is saying to Nicodemus, first of all, Nicodemus, you have to exist. What? You have to be a person? Because non-persons can't be saved? It's ridiculous. Furthermore, we, in this modern world, speak about the water breaking. The Hebrews never used that expression. He wouldn't know anything about that. This is not clinical. He's not talking about that. Others say the water is baptism. That's very popular. Commentators go on for pages, because you have to, since it's not here, trying to invent it. And they come up with Christian baptism, which didn't show up until the 2nd chapter of Acts. Nicodemus doesn't know anything about Christian baptism. He's giving him a hint. Now, where was Nicodemus' bailiwick? Where did he live and move and have his being? In what? The Old Testament. Does that ring a bell to you, Nicodemus? Does that ring a bell to you? Listen, he knew the Old Testament. He probably had massive